If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show. David, thanks so much for joining us.
Very welcome. Thank you.
So just give us a bit of context. Tell us about your business.
Bit of background. So going way back, which sounds many years ago now, I worked in the civil service for a couple of years, and I think that was back in the days where you left school and you were expected to go and work in the bank, so work in the civil service. So I worked in the civil service for a couple of years, and whilst I was working full time, I took a part-time job in the Rose and Crown in Rose Street, and being honest about it, just absolutely loved it. I just loved dealing with people and just loved the whole atmosphere and environment. I was then offered a full-time position working with Scottish and Newcastle breweries. They were probably the biggest managed pub estate in the UK at the time. And although my mum and dad were very against it, being honest about it, I eventually decided to take that up as a career. So I worked with Scottish Newcastle breweries for about 12 years, and it was just great grounding, if I'm very honest about it. So I worked eight years running various bars and restaurants in Edinburgh, and then I was in their head office for 4 years as a development manager. So I had a responsibility for any new acquisitions, working with the general manager or major refurbishments. So it was just great grounding, but I'd always given myself that by the age of 30, I wanted to be doing it for myself. And probably, fortunately for me, I started coming under a lot of pressure, head office-wise, to move down to Northampton. So it probably worked very well for me, because I was loving my job and working really hard and being well rewarded for it. So it may have been the situation where I probably just didn't make that jump to my own business. But with the pressure to move down to Northampton, which I just didn't want to do, that was probably the final kick up the bum that I absolutely required. So I missed it by a week. So a week after my 30th birthday, we actually acquired Montpelier up at Brunsfield, which was 1992.
So you, sorry, Dave, just to interrupt. So you were an employee up until that point, and then you immediately acquired a business.
Yeah, I probably jumped a few bits there, Alan. So I was working with Scottish and Newcastle breweries up until end of 1991. Yeah. And one of my last positions was that I was working as general manager, oblique development manager in the Golf Tavern down in Brunsfield. Yeah. And that's probably where I really appreciated just how great a location that whole Brunsfield Morningside area was. So that probably worked very well for me. I have jumped forward fairly substantially there. I was actually working on the Montpelier site for about 2 years before I actually left Scottish and Newcastle. It was just absolutely fraught with challenges and problems, just incredible stuff. Planning problems, licensing problems, trying to acquire the property problems. It was an Indian, I don't know if you remember, Alan, but it was an Indian restaurant and small lounge bar at that stage, and it was 3 Indian individuals that owned it, and for whatever reason they wouldn't sell it to us. So I had to engineer, true story, but I had to engineer a guy called Bally that had the restaurant down in Hanover Street to buy it and then flip it to ourselves. So it was an incredibly challenging 2 years, just huge amounts of ups and downs over the whole time. But I just believed in that site just so much. And I think, interestingly, I never ever worried about the success of the business. I worried it would never get up and running in the first place because of the massive challenges, planning, licensing, funding wise. There had been scaffolding across the whole property for about 5 years because of a tenement renovation and so on. Architects had gone bust and blah. So the whole thing was just a shambles. Had to get Nigel Griffiths at the time, MP, involved and so on to get the scaffolding down. It was just one thing after another. But as I say, I just believed in it so much that we got there eventually.
Wow. So in that moment when you're, like those 2 years, I mean, we're looking back quite a while now, but do you remember the pressures of it?
I probably don't, if I'm honest about it, Alex, but my wife talks about it quite a lot, and I do generally really wish I'd kept a diary of that whole time, because it was a really tough couple of years, if I'm very, very honest about it. And everyone was giving me advice: just walk away, and just don't do it, just because of the challenges and so on. But as I said, I just believed in the site and that location so much, and I was very, very aware that it was our first venture for ourselves, and it just couldn't, we just couldn't afford for it to fail. Even financially and so on. I had remortgaged my house for it and stuff like that. But I never ever looked upon these things particularly as risk, if I'm honest about it, just because I had that absolutely incredible confidence as regards the success of it. But I did worry, just with all the funding problems, planning, licensing I've discussed, that it just wouldn't get up and running in the first place. But we got there eventually. Yeah. And fortunately, once we did open it, it was just an incredible success from day one. So it just takes the pressure off.
And David, we've spoken just off camera as well about how kind of myself and my wife and our friends are responsible for the success of Montpelier. It's our favourite bar to this day in
very
Edinburgh.
Much appreciated that.
So a hugely successful bar in its own right, but of course then that was only the start.
Yeah.
And so
I think the original plan was that we wanted to have 4 or 5 bars and restaurants within that first 4 or 5 years. And again, being honest about it, I think it was such a success. Montpelier's at Brunchville was such a success that it took us a lot longer to move towards number 2. But I don't think that was a bad thing, if I'm honest about it, Alan, because we've always been very much about just a really, really solid business, a solid quality business, and we very much knew that we had to have that one absolutely solid and sustainable going forward before we moved on to number 2. As a business, we've always been about trying to be the best, not about being the biggest, and not from an egotistical point of view, but we always knew if we were the best, then the success would automatically follow from that. So it took us, a good few years, more than anticipated, to move to number 2. And then I think in 95 we opened Iguana, which was probably the first real cutting edge, cool student bar in Edinburgh. That again was just an incredible success. I think, being honest about it, one of the challenges of Iguana was we had 6 or 7 months of incredible success, and then 4 or 5 months of quite depressed success, just because of the student terms and stuff like that. And it was very, very student orientated. But overall, it was a really good business for us as well. And then in 96, we opened Indigo Yard down in the West End. And again, that was just an incredibly complicated transaction to deal with. It was owned by a landlord who leased to Scottish Newcastle, it was at the time, and he was subleasing on. So we had all three elements of that transaction to come together at the same time to allow us to acquire the freehold of Indigo Yard, and on top of that, again, all the licensing and planning elements that are attached to opening a new development and so on. And that was a big spend for us at the time. I think it was about £1.2 million back in 1995. So it was a really, really big investment. And I've had that was when my non-exec chairman, a gentleman called Stuart Ross, I invited Stuart to join us as a company. At the time, Stuart was chief executive of Belhaven Brewery, a qualified accountant, qualified solicitor, and Belhaven was one of our major suppliers, so I knew Stuart pretty well. And it just dawned on me one day, if I'm very honest about it. I remember sitting with the bank manager asking him for £1 million or whatever, and I just thought to myself, what am I doing here? I'm a bar restaurant operator. I had minimal business experience because working with Scottish and Newcastle and so on, all that element was done for you. You submitted your paperwork at the end of the week, and that was all done. And then it very quickly dawned on me that my amateurish approach to the Bank of Scotland for £1 million plus just wasn't probably the way to go about things. So I invited Stuart onto our board, and Stuart continues to be my non-exec chairman. He's been a phenomenal support to me over the years, absolutely phenomenal. And again, I think it's just a really, for me certainly, just an incredible, great business. It's one of my best business decisions, if I'm very, very honest about it, just to really bring that experience and that skill and that support on board, because genuinely, first and foremost, we were operators more so than business people, but we had to very, very quickly become quality business people.
Do you know, that's an interesting kind of thing that you say, because a lot of people kind of go into it having maybe kind of come from corporate or without any knowledge, or you're a good operator, but then, oh gosh, I need to learn a whole heap of stuff now that I didn't expect.
100%.
And so your view would be to take Stuart on board. Is it to recruit the skill in, or did you how much did you have to learn for yourself?
I think a real combination, if I'm honest about Alan. But I had Stuart at my side going forward there. That really gave me really strong advice, to go to the bank manager professionally next time round and so on. And as I said, Stuart's an incredible. He's one of my sort of top 3 business people I've met in the last sort of 30, 40 years. Wow. Phenomenal character, just a great passion for hospitality. Qualified accountant, qualified solicitor, and just phenomenal experience in his own career as well. So.
You said there was the delay between number 1 and number 2 opening it up. Was that down to just like busyness? Was it down to inexperience? Was it down to you were just making so much money? You were like, we'll open it. What was the delay?
Genuinely, Alex, I think it was more down to busyness of Montpelier's Bruntsfield more than anything else, because it was just an incredible success. Because I think, as well as being a phenomenal local for a lot of people such as yourself, Alan, I think it was a real destination venue for people from lots of other areas in Edinburgh and so on as well.
Where the cool people hung out.
It was, absolutely, 1,000,000%. And I think, so it was a positive delay, if I'm very, very honest about it. And it just took us a lot longer to get a real grip of the business and, get the business under total control, ensure that we had the management, in place to move on to number 2 and so on. Because, everything's got to be of quality to what we do, and I know that personally I would just never be comfortable. It's not just about turnover or money or anything else. We've got to have an absolute pride in what we do, and that pride comes from having that consistent, stable quality, I would say.
Yeah.
And so then you've got so we're on Indigo Yard, and then
Indigo Yard. So that Indigo Yard was 96. So again, I think we'd quite quickly taken in succession Iguana and Indigo Yard. Yeah. So it was about 4 years later when we opened Rick's in Frederick Street, and Rick's was probably the very, very first boutique hotel in Edinburgh. A small boutique hotel. It was only 10 bedrooms, but. Again, just I think a real first for Edinburgh. Probably the best quality cocktail bar in the city at the time. Best quality bartenders in the country, and as I say, probably the first venue to have the bedrooms and the bar restaurant at the same time. So it was very much a modern version of that old tavern, and again, just an incredible success from day one from us, and I think probably really put us on the map quite substantially as well.
And you said about the best quality kind of, I think earlier on you said mixologists in the country. How did you get them?
Oh goodness! I think we're very, very fortunate. Through a couple of senior members of our team, we had contacts with a couple of real quality Edinburgh guys, and that's quite a close knit community. That whole mixologist bartender community is quite tight. So they had their contacts from individuals just outside Edinburgh and other cities, Glasgow and Aberdeen and so on, and they were willing to move because we were doing something very, very new and refreshing to Edinburgh as well. And these guys always want to be working with the best at the time as well. So it was an absolutely perfect fit. Right. And I do genuinely believe that really changed. To some extent, it changed the face of drinking in Edinburgh, if I'm very, very honest, because it was probably the first real quality drinks. I'm older than you guys, so you guys possibly won't remember, but way back, probably prior to that, it was just so simple. It was draft dark beer or lager. It was white or red wine and soft drinks. And it wasn't much more complicated, more extensive than that. So just opening that up into real quality drinks, and it's the exact same concept as food in a kitchen with a great head chef. We were achieving that with mixologists and bartenders on the bar side of the business as well. So.
Do you remember what it was like then? Because to jump from running restaurants to then, a small hotel, do you remember some of those initial challenges?
It's a really interesting point, if I'm honest about it, Alex. I think it's a very, very interesting one, because our view is that I think hoteliers have always had a real challenge trying to operate bars and restaurants. But I always struggle to understand why bedrooms would be so difficult, if I'm very, very honest about it. And I'm not saying we didn't have our challenges, but being honest about it, it just wasn't the most complicated part of the business. I would generally say that the food and drink were more complicated than bedrooms. But it's been a really nice one. We've obviously now got Tiger Lily, which has got 33 bedrooms, which again have just been an incredible success for us. And, just very, very lucrative in bottom line terms as well. Given all that, you've got to keep the standards up and keep investing and keep evolving them and so on. But if I'm honest about it, I just don't think, especially with the software around in this day and age, I don't think bedrooms are the most complicated, most difficult, challenging things to
clean them.
Operate.
Just clean them, right? It's that easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh dear. And so obviously we've now got. Have we covered the full estate at the moment, or oh no?
No. From there we opened Candy Bar, which was then very, very quickly followed with Tiger Lily, which was our biggest investment to date by quite a long distance. I've talked about trying to become more professional as regards seeking my funding and so on, but I still remember telling Stuart Ross with Tiger Lily that I could do that for £5 million, and that was honestly, it was on the back of a cigarette packet at the time, and it ended up costing us about 8.5. But fortunately, it was at the time when the banks were very, very, very supportive, and so on. So it all worked out. But Tiger Lily was an interesting one. We'd been looking for quite a long period of time for that one space that could house the bedrooms, the bar, restaurant, and the nightclub under the one roof. And if I'm honest about it, I probably walked past Tiger Lily on hundreds of occasions in the months preceding that, because I just thought it was that typical Georgian townhouse, and I'd never read the for sale board or the letting board correctly. Anyway, we found out, and again, it was quite a challenging negotiation. It was owned by Tom Farmer at the time. And he was very, very close to embarking on a £2 million office refurbishment, because at that stage it had been an open plan standard life office, and they were refurbishing that. So I literally had days to sort of turn that situation around, or the £2 million refurbishment for office would have commenced. So that was probably not my easiest negotiations with Tom Farmer either. I got on brilliant, and I've got just huge respect for Tom and for everything he's achieved. But again, Stuart Ross and I had spent absolute hours working out exactly how we were going to approach this and what we were going to offer for it and so on. And he turned around to me and he said, "Listen, Sonny," he says, "this is the price I want and this is the price I'll get. And if I've got to have it sit and do nothing for the next 5 years, I'll have it do nothing for the next 5 years." And he did it in a almost a non-arrogant way. And he was so wealthy, he could afford to do that, but it just...
So at that point you said what? All right then.
I think we said we'll think about it, but it just wasn't workable for what he was looking for either. But he had an absolutely great number two, Aileen, who very much worked things round, so that it absolutely worked for Tom and it worked for us as well. And so that was where it all commenced. Nice. So yeah, that was. When I look back, it was probably a sizable risk, if I'm honest. But I don't think I ever contemplated it as a risk. But when I look back, spending £8.5 million on one venue, it was probably quite high risk stuff. But again, fortunately, being honest with it just was an incredible success from day one. We're very lucky in our business, maybe to a lesser extent now, but certainly back in these days when we're opening a lot of these venues, we're very, very fortunate that literally every business that we opened was just an absolute major success.
Is that
well,
I mean...
No, it's a good point, Alan. No, I don't think it was all luck. It was all very well planned and very, very well marketed and executed, or certainly to the absolute best of our ability. So I think it was a combination. Yeah, you always require a bit of fortune and so on as well. But we worked hard to achieve that as well, just to achieve these real points of difference, and build up that expectation and that real desire to try us out. And then it's down to us to be good enough to make sure we get that return business. So yeah. It's always a bit of a worry, when you're spending that level of money. But you can tell almost instantly within the first couple of days just how people have received it and what they think about it. And you just know yourself if it's likely to be a challenge or if it's likely to be a major success.
Do you know, as I listen to you, I'm thinking there's two words. You've used one of them, which is risk. And my question was going to be, what's your attitude to risk? In fact, let me, and I'll hold back on the other word.
I think, being honest, but I'd like to think of, we've always viewed calculated risk. I'm certainly willing to take risk, Alan, but I'm aware of a lot of other sort of quality operators that have maybe taken one risk too far and collapsed the whole thing and everything they've worked up towards. And I've always been very, very keen to ensure that anything we do would never ever take down the whole situation under an absolute worst case scenario. But being honest about it, looking back at Tiger Lily now, if it hadn't worked, then it would have had that potential potential consequence. Okay. But again, I'm sure it's all these things that absolutely drive you. The fear of failure has always driven me. If I'm very, very honest about it, I've always sort of thought to myself how I deal with failure. And if I'm honest about it, probably not very well. So that really, really spurs you on. And again, I think as a business, I think we've always been very, very good at always finding solutions. We'll never ever back off to challenges, hurdles, and so on. We'll always do whatever is necessary to find these solutions, and there are always solutions. Sometimes it's a wee bit less clear than others, and so on. But there's always solutions to achieve that success, I believe. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The other word that was rattling in my head when you said risk was, I think, confidence. Yeah. And I just wonder how much so you had a major success at Montpelier's, and then you so how confident were you that says, okay, we've got something here that we just we can replicate?
I think it's a really good question, but I'd like to think that we've always been confident, jumping back to 1992 when we opened our very, very first venture, which, was a big deal at the time. And, but I always had absolute supreme, genuinely, without being arrogant in any way at all, we always had absolute supreme confidence that it would succeed. But because of all the challenges over that 2-year period that I've discussed, I did worry at times that whether it would get up and running in the first place, but I never ever worried if we could make it happen and get the doors open.
How important is the ownership of the property? Because you're almost a property business as much as...
It is an important one, if I'm honest, and I'll come and talk about that a wee bit further down the line. But the freehold is an important element. It's a really difficult one, Alex, because freehold can suck up a lot of cash. So as a business, our strategy has almost been a bit of a mixture of freehold and leaseholds. If you take Tiger Lily as an example, we leased that, and we just couldn't have afforded to spend. I think the property price was about 12-13 million pounds at the time and stuff like that. So that combined with an £8 million refurbishment was just too much, just far too much. So I think under an ideal situation, you would always go for freehold, because under exit, the multipliers of EBITDA are just substantially more than a sort of leasehold business. But the reality is that you require deep pockets if you're going freehold the whole way. Yeah. So we've had to really mix the whole thing.
I thought the 8 million was the purchase, but that was just the renovation. Wow.
It was a big job. It was 5 floors, 35,000 square foot, and just, as I say, just very, very basic open plan office space, and we had to convert it into 33 real quality bedrooms. And a very, very sizable bar restaurant, and then a very sizable nightclub underneath that as well. So it took a lot of money. That was an interesting point, but we were voted one of the when we first opened Tiger Lily, we were voted one of the top 10 sexiest hotels in the world with Tiger Lily by Condé Nast, which was absolutely amazing. And again, being honest with you, I don't think we've ever dropped down in occupancy in Tiger Lily over that 17, 18 years, which is incredible.
How did you get notified of that accolade? Is that an email that you get, or a phone call, a text message? What happened?
I think it was it was probably a phone call back in these days. I'm not quite sure if it's text messages were flying around these days. I'm giving it my age here. But yeah, it came through one of our, probably through our PR department, our PR firm, if I'm honest about it, and so on. But that was a really, really nice one, if I'm very honest about it. It's an interesting one. We've won lots and lots of awards over the years, and we've probably withdrawn from entering a lot of stuff now. And it's just a personal thing. I'm probably being a bit cynical, but it probably doesn't put any money in the bank account type of thing, but we very, very much respect and appreciate that it can be really rewarding for staff and so on. So it's an absolute balance and so on. But we do find that there are so many different awards out there that the amount of time that can be committed to entering these things properly can be very, very substantial. So we've just backed off a wee bit.
And the number of tables you have to buy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the game, right?
Yeah, there's some great credible awards out there, but there's a lot of not so credible ones, I would say, as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned staff there as well. So I get, maybe this takes us on, by this time you must have an awful lot of people in the business and to train them to the standards that you're expecting. So so
I think at that stage, Alan, we're up to about 350 members of staff, so probably about 50% part-time, 50% full-time. And training was an incredibly important point of difference for us as a business, if I'm very honest about it. Yeah. I think I'd mentioned earlier that again, in structure terms, we had a very, very rigid structure that all of our new starts came via our dedicated training centre for a minimum of 28 hours, which sounds very substantial, but our viewpoint was that we're pretty much charging pretty much full dollar for our drink and our food. And a member of the public's not interested whether that member of staff's been there a day, a week, or a month. They want that level of service that they're absolutely buying into. So that absolutely necessitated that we ensured that new member of staff was up to a good standard before we allowed them onto any of our bars or restaurant floors.
And with hospitality, being there's quite a churn in staff, I guess.
Yeah, and that really compounded the challenge, being honest about it, Alan, because I think our average sort of cycle of staff was every 18 months. So we were turning that 350 members of staff every 18 months. And that sounds a real high turnover of staff. It wasn't. We retain our staff really, really well, but we employed a lot of Aussies and Kiwis that were travelling and maybe just working with us, but they were such good quality that we're happy to get six or 8 months out of them. And the same as students and so on as well. So yes, it was, although it worked very, very well in business and in sales terms, we believe for us, the actual cost of, 350 members of staff every 18 months going through our dedicated training centre and the cost of trainers as well as the 28 induction hours, it was a real challenge.
So what did you do?
What do we do? I think things evolved over a bit of a period of time. I was doing lots of thinking around that time how we could achieve the same quality and the same quantity of training, because that was just an absolute given that we just could not pull back on that under any circumstances. But I think over a period of months probably, we started appreciating that there was quite a sizable element of the training that was happening in that very, very expensive training centre overhead could actually be done online in an individual's own time. And, things I was mentioning, but at that stage, we felt it was a real hybrid combination. So they were still coming through our dedicated training centre for probably I think it was about 12 hours instead of the 28 hours, but the other 16 hours were happening online in an individual's own time. Most certainly all the compliance, the more black and white elements of the training and so on as well. So that worked really well, and we were able to take a lot of costs out of our business whilst retaining the quality of service and the quality of skills and personnel.
And how did that business develop then?
I think quite quickly, if I'm honest, but Alan, I think we started appreciating that there was a real opportunity out there in the wider hospitality marketplace. So my wife is a qualified staff trainer, and our absolute passion's always been training. So Ruth, at that stage, pretty much set up her own business to create this online training for the hospitality industry. And it was again, it was probably one of the most proudest elements of my career, if I'm very honest with it, because we knew hospitality. I'd lived and breathed hospitality for so many times and done all my training through Scottish and Newcastle breweries. We didn't know tech, if I'm very, very honest about it. So there was lots of challenges and lots of just finding a way as you go along, being very, very frank about it. But again, if I'm very, very frank about it, it was probably quite a slow build for the first sort of 4 or 5 years. What we absolutely found, was that the industry almost wasn't ready for it in tech terms. And a wee example of that was that obviously it was Ruth and I's sort of money, because it was a separate company. It was Ruth's company, and so on. So we were I didn't want to take bank funding, so we were just funding everything as regards what we could afford at the time. And we were chasing one of the real sort of quality hotel groups from the north of Scotland, and I think at that time they had about 20 hotels. So we had them all down to Tiger Lily, fed them and watered them and everything else. It was a pretty expensive bill for us. And the following day, I found out that none of their hotels had any Wi-Fi, as an example. and that was the truth. And that was probably, I'm not saying it was indicative, but there was a lot of it around the hospitality industry. They were pretty slow in embracing technology. So for that first 4 or 5 years, it was a bit of a slow burn, which was maybe, again, not a bad thing. It allowed us to really build a real quality suite of modules and content, and we also built our own platform to register all the performance of individuals from the training of the modules as well. The last 5 years, up until I think it was December 2019, was just an absolutely incredible major success for us. I think what we absolutely quickly appreciated was that in competitive terms, there was probably 2 or 3 other companies that were targeting the hospitality industry with online training. But being frank about it, it was all pretty boring, pretty one-dimensional, pretty flat, pretty uninspiring. I don't mean to be critical, but that was the absolute truth. And it was all about compliance. So it was real box ticking stuff, if I'm very, very honest about it. And the compliance is critical, but we felt there was a real opportunity, as well as being able to take a lot of costs out of our business to really drive sales in a business with, as an example, average spends and so on. So we also created, I think, about a further 10 modules, which was customer service it sells, which is all about upselling, wine, bartending, whiskey, everything.
And all this training, what's the format that people are kind of then getting the training? Is it PowerPoint? Is it video? Is it what's the? It
was all very, very interactive modules.
Right.
So they had to work themselves through the modules, Alan, and then at the end of each module there was a test that was automatically then populated into the platform and so on. So you could tell absolutely everything from the platform. You could tell exactly how, what time was spent on it, which questions they got right, which ones they got wrong, how much time they'd spent on each element of the module and so on. So it was real Big Brother stuff. And it also allowed employers to really structure their training so they could decide exactly how many days were in between each module, and how much time was being allowed to complete these modules. It was really pretty comprehensive.
And so this training business was then called
Flow Hospitality Training.
Okay, and so what happened to that then? Because there's a
Just if I'm honest about it, Alan, it just really exploded over that next 4 or 5 years. That was probably from about 2014, 2015 through to about 2019, and it was an incredible situation. We won about 700 plus contracts all over the UK, some stuff in Europe, some stuff in America. Had probably more than 500,000 trainees operating on the platform at any one time. And just an incredible client base. We had all the Savoys and the Ritzes down in London, because I think it was such a quality, engaging, interactive product. All these real quality 5-star hotels were more than happy for all their staff to be working on a real quality product or training on a real quality product. And because it absolutely had that ability to take costs out of a business and drive sales in a business, it was a bit of a no-brainer, if you were talking to FDs in a business or whatever, because we're able to demonstrate and bring evidence to all of these stats that we were quoting them and so on as well. So it was just a lovely, lovely business. I think we had built it up to about £7.5 million worth of recurring revenue, and I think about £3.5 million of recurring EBITDA, up to that sort of 2019 situation.
And before we get to the next bit, how did the word get out then? Because obviously, with so many kind of high profile customers coming on board, this is a small business from Edinburgh, So how do you get to the Savoys and all the rest of them?
Being honest about it, I've absolutely fast tracked that through substantially. There was probably a good number of years in between that was very, very slow. And I think in that situation, you're always looking to win that one absolute key, very respected client that can really sort of drive everyone else. If that great client's working it, then it must be good for us as well. So we actually won Green King, which was the biggest pub operator in the UK at the time, and it was a major one for us. It was a really, really lucrative contract, and I think from there it just really started just picking up real traction. But as I say, the really, really nice ones, we managed to break into that real quality London hotel marketplace, because being frank about it, we felt that things were just very, very much more affordable in the hotel market than it was in the pub market. Pubs are probably notorious for being fairly miserable and mean with their spend. And being frank about it, we could probably get about £800 for a single pub, but we could go down to London and get £20,000 per year for one single hotel. So we probably started swinging the business a bit more sort of hotel orientated and real quality bar restaurant orientated, and we appreciated that sometimes pub wise and so on for the more traditional pubs and so on, it probably wasn't as important to them, and there was other competitors that were servicing them pretty well as well. So it was just a lovely, lovely business, and I think with our bar and restaurant experience, it's all about service, just great service, and we attached that to the flow business as well. So it wasn't just about winning contracts; it was about retaining contracts and ensuring that our clients were getting an absolute return on their investment. So we literally hardly lost any customers, unless it was maybe a customer that got into financial difficulties or whatever. So I think our churn at the time was about 1.9%. I think it was. Wow. And we just kept building onto that.
And so hugely successful and attractive business with that kind of EBITDA and recurring revenue as well. So what then?
Being honest about it, it was a business, if I'm very frank about it, it was a business that we always built for exit.
Yeah.
as I say, built for exit, and something that Ruth and I could just absolutely own for ourselves, and not really answerable. So we always had that plan to exit that business. So we worked with we had probably been working up. Prior to 2019, we'd been working with Ernst Young, really planning that exit, which again, the benefits when I look back of just having all your ducks in a row and just being supremely organised and ensuring that you're hitting all the right numbers and the right growth percentages and so on before you go to market was just incredibly important. And I've got to say, Ernst Young were absolutely brilliant. And that was headed up by Ali Scott. I don't know if you know Ali's a sort of Morningside boy as well, but he's managing partner of Ernst Young in Scotland. So I've been pals with Ali for a long period of time, but he'd be in my top three as well. Just phenomenal, just great. It was just a great team that were working. So
Alex, there's chance yet. There's one space in that top three. It might be you.
It very may have been if we'd known each other.
And so Flow was then acquired?
It was acquired in December 2019, and again, very fortunately, 3 months before COVID kicked in, and I do think substantially, if I've been trying to navigate 2 hospitality businesses through COVID, but we were very, very fortunate, and it was just an absolute luck and coincidence. We did sell in 2019, so we sold out to a very, very large American private equity firm, and it was a phenomenal process. Being honest about it, I think we had 14 bids for the business, 14 substantial bids for the business. Wow. And just went for a great sum of money. We went for a very, very sizable eight-figure sum, which was quite incredible. But I think it just absolutely ticked all the boxes, just with that recurring revenue. It's such a low churn, such a year-on-year growth rate percentage. It was just.
And was that a number that you and Ruth were like delighted with, or had you set your sights on a number, and was this better than you expected, or again? Well, I'm not going to ask you.
It was a number that we were absolutely delighted with, if I'm honest about it. And it was if I look back 6 months, or just when 6 months prior to going into the actual real process, the number was probably half that, and it just kept going up and up as the process sort of went through and so on. So it was just an incredible result.
Can I just ask as well, when the numbers were going up and up, was that because there was 14 people interested and that competitive tension kind of raised the price, or?
I think there was an element of that,
right.
Being honest, but it was an incredibly interesting process, because it was 4 real quality offers and 4 offers that were all right up there, real competing offers and so on. And we ended up literally, we were 24 hours away from going exclusive with it was actually a British, very sizable British private equity firm, and they did something just right at the tail end that really frustrated me. Because going exclusive is the risk starts really kicking in at that stage, because if anything goes wrong with the deal, then it's quite difficult to go back to parties that you've almost dropped off. And as I say, the private equity firm that were very, very close to going exclusive with did something silly just right at the tail end. It was quite a lot of money involved. It was about £2 million worth involved. It was all relative to sort of cash in bank and debtors and creditors and blah, 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 the Dropbox. So just by absolute coincidence, there was a new partner that had joined Ernst Young in the London office that was aware of this American private equity firm that hadn't been in the running of things at all, because they hadn't been on our radar, because they were big boys and everything was £150 million plus that we're looking at. But they had this absolute objective and strategy to create the one-stop shop, to create the best software within the hospitality industry, and they had I think it was £150 million to spend on that and so on, but they were willing to to break that £150 million up. So they suddenly came onto our radar. And we took a risk and we flew to Madrid to meet these guys because we were actually having a board meeting in Madrid the following day. The whole thing just moved very, very, very quickly after that. And they just outbid everyone, which was absolutely amazing. And I've got to say, the management team that now operate Flow and other products, still based in Madrid, but real top quality team. And I've got to say that the private equity guys were real quality guys as well, and not your probably your perceived perception of private equity as being absolutely ruthless and brutal and everything else. Because I've stayed in touch with them, and just a really good bunch of guys, really good bunch.
And out of interest for you, was it a clean break for you? Or did you have to stay in the business on an earn-out?
It was, being honest about it, Alan. Out of the, I think, 15 offers that we had, that was the only clean break, because every other private equity firm would have wanted Ruth and I to stay in. Yeah. And we were happy and willing to stay in. But when I look back now, I think it was absolutely the right thing for us to get out at that stage. Right. So we've reinvested monies going forward, which I think will work really well for us and so on. But we've had absolutely no operational responsibility, over the last few years. But again, just very interestingly, the whole Flow team, they have succeeded incredibly within the bigger Montpelier team, it's called, the Madrid-based company, and all been promoted and all still on board. Which I love that situation, because we want to be proud of Flow and everything we've built up, and we want it to continue to succeed. We don't want it to see it dropping back and so on as well. So no, it was a really nice business. Really,
so the
nice
management
business.
team then that were kind of Winflow, they all kind of enjoyed the benefits as well of.
Yeah, again, one that I'm just very, very proud of, Alan, is that we put together an incentive for the senior management team, which was the EMI scheme, which was structured through Adolfo Goddard, our solicitors at the time, and that was probably about 3 years prior to exit. So I think there was about 6 or 7 members of the senior team that had a stake in that EMI scheme, and I absolutely loved that. Everyone was absolutely rewarded for just an incredible commitment and success over these years. Because I've said to a few people that I absolutely believe that with that unbelievable incentive and the fact that they were just seriously good quality and committed individuals as well. But I think they just went absolutely above and beyond for that last 3 or 4 years, probably to the extent I would say 50% more than that average member of a team or staff and so on. And we had team members that were down in London the best part of 4 or 5 days of the week and stayed overnight and away from their families and everything else as well. So I absolutely love the fact that they were just really well rewarded for that. Yeah. And they've as I say, they've continued on and invested further into the larger business, and will reap further rewards when and if they exit further down the line as well.
Oh, right, incredible.
So yeah, just a really nice story, and just a really nice reward.
So basically from Montpelier's Brunsfield, a nice estate of excellent sites with kind of accolades, and then a training business as well. So it's interesting just to kind of hear your story about how you said you didn't feel you were experienced in business on that first deal with the bank, here you are kind of dealing with private equity and selling for a healthy
Do you know, I'm actually quite proud of that as well, because I don't know how many presentations we did to potential buyers, and mostly private equity down in London and so on as well. And I used to always think to myself, just a sort of daffy boy from Dundee Street in Edinburgh, sitting presenting to private equity firms and sizable private equity firms. But it was great, and I think you actually quite quickly appreciate that you're almost as good as these guys and so on. And again, I don't mean that arrogantly, but you always underestimate your own abilities and your own skills and experiences and so on as well. And then, as I say, just over time, you start appreciating that you're not that wee dafty. You can almost equal these guys, and you're every bit as able as these guys as well, which was good.
Yeah. And through it all, have you had a guiding principle in business?
Guiding principle, Alex. I would say the biggest thing for me is to absolutely retain your integrity. I think that is just such a huge thing. It's a huge thing in life, but it's a huge thing in business as well. And, I'd like to think we've always gone about our business absolutely respectfully, with real integrity, and we try and cascade that down into our whole business, because it's such an important thing. I think you can be really successful, but be a decent person at the same time. You don't have to be a twat or a real bee. So I think that's just so crucial, and I think that's what builds that trust with your staff and teams, with your suppliers, with your funders, everyone. If that integrity is retained, and it can be challenging at times. Sometimes if you've got really, really tough times or whatever, you can think about doing something a wee bit. I'm not saying naughty, but probably not in the way you would normally behave. But I think it's just crucial you just absolutely retain that integrity. So important.
And that would normally be the last question we ask, but I've just remembered something. Go and just tell us, who's the most famous person you've ever had dinner with?
Oh my goodness! Again, I think because of the style of business and the quality of businesses that hopefully we've developed over the years, I think we've had lots and lots of very, very well-known faces around, but probably one of the really nicest one was George Clooney. I actually had lunch with George Clooney in Tiger Lily. It was all linked to Social Bite that I was on the board with as well, and so on. But brilliant, and he was sitting there with the Candy Brothers from London and stuff like that, and so on. Just incredible. I think I was saying earlier on that with one of our businesses, we managed to be awarded the after drinks party for the MTV Awards, which gave us Christina Aguilera and Kylie Minogue and the Black Eyed Peas and Justin Timberlake and everything else. So I think these are really, really nice things, and I think it's probably quite nice to celebrate these nice things, because there's always lots of challenges and lots of pain and graft that goes into the business. So these can be the really nice rewards as well, which is lovely.
Amazing.
Good.
David, thank you so much for coming on and
Very welcome.
sharing
Thank
some
you.
of your stories, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it. Thank you.